Welcome to Squirrel, the podcast for distracted writers, hosted by Candace J. Thomas and Jody L. Milner. Hey everybody, welcome to Squirrel. This is Jody.
And I'm short-circuited Candace.
This is Candace.
I cursed her.
If you guys were listening to last week's, you know that we had a slight oversight where we forgot that May was International Short Story Month.
Now here we say oversight. That's not true.
I mean, we did catch it in the month of May.
I have been waiting for the eclipse episode, so we were behind on that one.
And then
we had Mother's Day.
And then we had our 45, so we had to do
We had to do books, and so here we are.
It's appropriate.
46,
it works. It works.
And it's Short Story Month, and you've got 5 more days to enjoy this, I guess.
You could totally write a short story in 5 days.
Oh, yeah. Challenge yourself.
Okay, so
the end. That's at the end of our episode.
What I think is really funny is that April was National Poetry Month, and Candace knows I'm no poet.
That's true.
I know that Candace really doesn't do short stories.
That's true.
So I feel it's payback time.
Okay.
Just a little bit.
I have a few. Well,
you do have a few. All right, so I'm going to do a really brief history of Short Story Month because I had never heard of it until I started doing some research for the month of May, and it popped up on my dash, and I'm just like, that's interesting. It hasn't been around super long. It actually happened as a reaction to National Poetry Month.
Of course it did.
Dan,
hey, but you need to love us too.
Yeah. So exactly, Dan Wickett, he's the founder and editor of Emerging Writers Network, or EWN. I know some people have heard of that because that has popped up here and there. He published a post back in 2007. He said, should this be Short Story Month? And he was literally drawing inspiration from National Poetry Month. So he decided to devote the following month to one of his favorite narrative forms. And so every day of the month of May, he reviewed one of his favorite short stories, and he kind of made it a thing. And it was meant initially to only be on the EWN, but the book community is like, oh, we like this idea. This is fun. And so within a few days, it got picked up by all these other literary blogs and magazines, and all of a sudden they're like, we're making this a thing now. And so it's a thing now. And the month was such a success, and readers liked it so much that they kept on doing it year after year, and they redoubled their efforts. And now they have a place where they challenge people to either read or review or write short stories in the month of May, which I think is cool.
That's fun.
So it is a story form that is very different than poetry, and is very different than long form storytelling such as novels.
Yep. True.
First of all, we need to discuss our own experiences with short stories.
Absolutely. Do you want me to go first?
Would you like to?
Sure. I first published a short story in an anthology in 2014.
Is that Moments in Millennia?
Yeah. It was Moments in Millennia, and my story is called Hawkweed. It's futuristic,
that was a Skylar.
It was. Yeah, it was with our first publisher. And it's actually, according to length, it's definitely a novella. So, and I still think that it needs more life because many people have gone, you got to tell me more about this story. So, because I'm wordy, this was my first attempt with the short story. And actually I'd written it, and it was a very hard book or story for me to write, honestly. And it was one of those I need to heal from, a tragedy type of story, which we do that a lot of the time, right? Because of that, I just didn't think that I could write any more of the story. So I thought, well, I'll submit it to this anthology and see what they think. And I loved it. So that was my first experience with the short story. And then I have, just within the last year, published 2. So I'm in this anthology called Kindred Spirits, where my story is called Fate and Karma Meet for Coffee.
I have read that one. That's really cute.
It's really cute. I love that one.
Actually, I've read Hawkweed too.
Hawkweed's awesome. Oh, it's just so awesome. I need to revisit that one. And then the other story was published in the Big Book of Things That Go Bump in the Night, and that came out last November from Timber
Ghost Press.
Timber Ghost Press, and that was my story was called The Burgle. And it's a little monster that lives under your bed, and he steals your aspirations at night.
Yeah.
It's
We've talked about the Burgle before. We talked about him in October.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Right before the book came out? I think so.
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I think that's when we were helping the word get out for Things That Go Bump.
Oh, yeah, probably. But that's all the short stories I have published. I've gotten a few written, but not many, because a lot of them are ideas for other books. Or I will flesh out mythology for something. It's a, quote, short story, but it really is just my prep work for other stuff,
which is valid.
Yeah, and I don't want those published. I don't want people seeing them, not until it's time.
Here's a big trick. Novelists intend to write short stories and then they turn into books.
Yeah,
it happens a lot more than you'd think it would.
Yeah.
Surprisingly. So my experience with publishing short stories, I have 6 out. And so the very first one was also in a Schuyler anthology, and that was called, the story was called Breath, and the anthology was Toll of Another Bell. And then I have 2 stories in 2 different LTE anthologies. So I've got one in Parliament of Wizards, and that story is The Business of Dragons. And then I've got one in A Dragon and a Girl, and that one is, which one is that one? That one's called Air Vicus. And Air Vicus is the one I'm rewriting into a book right now, which I'm really excited about.
Cool.
And then Camden Park Press did a dragons one. It was called Wings of Change. And that one is called Saffron Dragon, and it's based in India. So that one was a cool alternate world dragon. And then I have one that was published in SQ Magazine. That was called The Skull Collector.
Did it also have a dragon in it? Because I'm finding a feed
that
like
one
this
did not
type of theme here.
3 of those had dragons, but Skull Collector was if Moana met the Hunger Games.
I can't even imagine that.
It was kind of an odd premise, but I liked it. And then I have a tiny one called The Music of Heaven that was in like the Eagle Mountain conference anthology.
Oh, that's adorable.
And it's a weird sci-fi about special music that can destroy the world. Like the tones do something to the atmosphere and science and stuff.
I do have, you just sparked a memory, not really a memory, but a thing that I do is I publish on Medium. I do have some short stories on Medium that I also have some of my poetry. Please link all of this stuff.
You gave me a list, so I can.
So,
and I forgot to put on this list, I actually do have my novelette, but it's now part of the Shadow Barrier Complete Trilogy omnibus, so I can't offer it anymore because it's been published on KDP.
Gotcha.
Oops.
Well,
that was my reader magnet. By the way, not my best move.
The reader magnet?
I put my reader magnet for the Stonebearer's works into a published work, so I can no longer give it away for free. So I'm going to be making a new one.
That is true.
Because I'm smart.
Is pushing it to your omnibus.
I know. I have plans. I just need to find an extra couple dozen hours. Okay, so just kind of a basic rundown on lengths of short story, and I'm just going to do this really, really fast. So short stories are typically between 1,500 and 7,500 words. The sweet spot, I'm told, is roughly about 6,000.
Yes.
Is my first story that was ever published close to 6,000? Absolutely not. It's in the 9,000 range because I'm an overachiever. But yours was like way over too.
It was like 20,000.
Yeah.
I'm not joking.
So around 6,000, it's enough length to give time for things to be developed, but not too much time to start getting lost in side stories and extra characters.
Yeah.
And so it's a good place.
We'll talk about the tricky
and we're going to go deeply into that. There is a list of different story lengths that we will have on the blog that's really fascinating. It goes from 6-word stories all the way up to the novel lengths. But there's ones I'd never heard of, like the Twitterature, which is a tweet length story. So less than 280 characters. Okay. They upped the length a couple of years ago. There's the mini saga or a dribble, which is less than 50 words, the microfiction or a drabble, which is less than 100, sudden, which is less than 750, flash, which is under 1,500. And then short stories all over the map. Novelette has a really wide range. This one's quoting between 7,500 and 1,900, although I've heard that novella is definitely more in that 20,000 to 35,000. Anyway, that's a lot of numbers to just spew at you.
40,000 could be a novel.
It could be like the beachy reads and like these kind of afternoon read romances tend to be in the 35 range, just because there's a whole category for short read, like short read fiction on Amazon. Like they have a category for that, which I didn't know about.
Is that the Kindle Vella?
No, it's different.
The Kindle Vella is where you can do
is more of a serialized fiction.
Yeah. That serial fiction, if anyone doesn't, is episodic. So you're just getting a chunk at a time.
Yeah, it's like you get a chapter every week, and it depends on how the person is doing it. And that's going to be something we should handle in another episode, because that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
I think for funsies, we need to talk about the do's and don'ts.
Oh, you love writing. These do's and don'ts.
I do, because it makes very handy and tidy lists. All right, so we're going to start with our don'ts. We each have 3, and then we'll end on our do's, so we end on a positive note.
Okay.
And so my first don't is do not write a vignette and call it a short story. So a vignette is generally a short description of a singular event or moment. They don't have structure more than one person, like one person is experiencing them. A short story, on the other hand, has a beginning, a middle, and end. Each part leads to the next, and the main character has some kind of problem or goal that they solve. If you're just telling me about how your day went and you're saying this is a short story, it's not. Kids will write vignettes all the time and call them short stories, and they are adorable. But if you're like, I'm going to turn this into this short story contest, you will get slammed.
Well, they don't know the word vignette. It's not even in their, like, spelling bee. So.
No, but when you think of a little kid telling a story.
Oh, yeah. That's so true.
It just rambles around and it doesn't really have a point.
Mm-hmm.
It's a vignette.
That's cute. All right. So I love the do's and the don'ts, and I'm glad that you just let me do my own.
I was trying to keep an open mind on this.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So my don't is don't outline.
I have feelings about that.
Because you have feelings about outlining. Like you are an outliner. You've got
I'm when you hybrid. Come on.
When you come up with that idea, I'm saying you as in very general, and I'm sorry about that.
I love how you keep pointing at me when you say it, though.
Yeah, so maybe I am pointing directly to you. But I can see that you come up with a story and then you outline it as in this needs to happen, this and this. Okay, this is what I'm going to suggest. Don't outline. Write like you did in high school. Just let the story come and just write it and just see what happens. You don't need to edit it. You don't need an ending. Just a stopping point. Because really short stories don't need endings. They need stopping points. Because in any of mine, you have to leave like the reader going, okay, now what? I'm going to fill in the blank, basically. So that's what I say. You just need a stopping point. You don't need an end. Yeah, so that's my advice. There are 0 stakes when it comes to
it's
short
a much
stories.
Looser form. Like with short story, you can take a lot of liberties with it. And I will argue about not needing any sort of ending. I think there needs to be some resolution, and that comes on a different point. So we will talk more about resolutions later.
The point that I'm getting to, really, when it comes to don't outline, is right. You have 0 stakes. You just need imagination. Just have imagination take over. Regardless of what your whole idea is about, you have probably a good foundation of what your idea is going to be. So just let imagination fill in the blanks. That was my point.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. The next don't is don't walk up to the story. Now, if you haven't heard this phrase before, let me kind of explain it. When you walk up to the story, you're taking the character way back into their day and letting them experience normal life for a while before thing happens. In short stories, you want to eliminate that because that's not the interesting bit. The interesting bit is thing happening. And so you want to know in the first paragraph who your main character is, what the big problem is, and what they're trying to achieve. And Candy found a cool quote.
I did. Kurt Vonnegut said that you should start as close to the ending as possible.
It's perfect. I like it.
Yeah. My turn?
It is.
Okay. My next one is don't rush. So I think creativity shouldn't be interrupted. And this is the same frame of mind where the imagination, just let the imagination plop down and take over. But don't worry about the word count. That's what editing's for. On a counterpoint to Jody, yes, you need to start early with the problem, but rushing the plot doesn't set up the reader's imagination. So it's a tricky balance. That's what we were talking about before. You need to create an environment for the short story that's different than a novel because you don't have any time, right? So using very creative word choices is important. I view it very cinematically. You can tell a story with environment just as well or better than conversations.
All right. My next don't is don't get mired in backstory. Okay, your character might be really, really cool, but in a short story, you don't have the time to go through and explain all the coolness. You need to show it, and you need to show it really fast. So you need to suggest the details, but don't elaborate. In your first draft, don't worry about this, but in the editing, and a lot of the gold of short story writing happens in the editing, where you find concise ways of saying exactly what you want to say.
Specifically when you have a word count that you have to meet.
Exactly. If you have to stay under a certain amount and you have a lot of neat things to say, you want to maximize the neat stuff and not waste time on stuff the reader doesn't really need. And backstory can be one of those things that they don't really need if you just give them enough hints where they're like, I think this guy has a past that's fascinating. He might have killed someone. It just takes up a lot of space on the page, and you can use that space to create tension, engage the senses instead.
Okay. My last one is don't add a lot of characters. And because there's just no time to get to know the cast. You have to limit it. And as you said before, or no, you haven't done that yet.
I'm getting there.
Okay, you are getting there. I'm jumping ahead, everyone. No, you need to limit the characters because you just don't have time. And when it comes to characters, for short stories, I think they can't be, I call them doughy. They can't be doughy.
They have lots of sharp corners.
They need to be unique, crisp, and angled.
Whatever that means.
You know exactly what that means. You need to give your characters dimension before you put them in your story. They have to have a past that and it needs to be expressed, let's say, right in that first paragraph, right? So your characters need to have dimension. There should be identifiable qualities that a reader can pick up on to form the character, motives, agenda rather quickly. You just don't have time with short stories. I think the same goes for stories that you are using as magnets, like Jody might say. If this is the first time people are being introduced to this character, you might need to establish a dynamic statement of who this character is. There you go.
Alrighty. So those are our don'ts when you're working on a short story. But now we're going to end on positive notes, and we're going to end on the do's.
So here's the deal. I don't write short stories. So I struggled with the do's because I don't really have much experience with the do's. Okay. So be generous with my do's. My do for a short story is just to have a good time. Because short stories are where you can feel creative again, right? They sometimes just need to come out of us. We just like want to experiment with them and just have, as I've said before, the imagination and the creativity that just pours out of you when you're doing these. And you don't need to really look at the whole thing until it's done, right? And then you can go and clean up and fix all the stuff. But just having fun and just letting that imagination just drip is awesome. It's, yeah. I think short stories can help remind you of how fun writing is.
This is true.
So
I think you can have a lot of fun with a short story. Okay, my first do is stick to one POV character and one focused storyline, because each time you add another POV character or point of view character, you're going to double the length of the story. And each time you add a diverging storyline, it's going to be exponential how big it gets, and then you have a book. So if your goal is to stay with a short story, I strongly encourage you to just stick with the one person's point of view. And this might be a challenge because you're like, but I want to show the scene from this other angle. I'm like, find a way of keeping it within your one character, because that's going to maintain your reader's focus better. Because every time you divide that focus, you divide your reader's focus as well. And they're going to have a harder time really just digging into the meat of the story itself.
That's a good point.
Do stick to one POV.
What do you think of, if it's not working, changing the point of view to somebody else's character?
I think it's an amazing thing to try, especially if you're stuck. I think that works for anything, swapping up who's telling the story. Because it should be the person who has the most stakes, but if that's not working, it could be the person who's the most interesting to tell the story.
It might be the bad guy. Who even knows?
Might be the bad guy's dog.
Okay, so my next do is, I don't know what
say if you add extra characters.
What characters you do add, mess them up. So I love this. Just really screw over their lives to see what they are made of. You know, we don't necessarily need to see them get to this point. All the readers need is the problem that they now face, right? But if you've written dynamic characters, you should prove it. They need to win if you want them to win. So just see what they're made of. Readers want to root for characters and have them find a way to solve the problem and make it worth it. That's all.
Make them exciting.
Just really screw them up.
Anyone in there should have a dang good reason for being there.
Give them the problem that they just absolutely can't solve and see what they do.
Put them in a tree and throw rocks at them.
That's a problem we can solve.
And then set the tree on fire.
Yeah. If you have it on fire, what are they going to do?
All right, here's my next do. Do everything you can to be concise and precise in your language, which I could have just said concise. Education. And this is my worst metaphor ever. Ready?
Sure.
If a novel is a bowl of soup, then a short story is a bouillon cube.
What?
It's concentrated. It's more intense. And it might raise your reader's blood pressure.
So you're telling us to suck on a bouillon cube?
I didn't say it was a good metaphor. I said it would stick with you.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Have you done that?
Sucked on bouillon cubes?
Yeah.
Why? Maybe.
Of course you have. I've done that. When you're desperate and you're poor and you just like, I'm just going to lick this chicken bouillon cube. I've done it.
Wow.
No, there's no wow. I know you've done it.
Maybe.
They're the cutest. They're cute little wrapped presents.
They're
with tastiness in it. So
now this is the mystery do.
Yeah, so I didn't come up with one. I do.
You said you had one.
In my
your head
brain
somewhere.
Yes.
If I shake you hard enough, will it fall out?
No.
Dang it.
Well, here, what I was thinking of is I just want you to share. Just share your stories. That's all.
Find a place to put your story.
Yeah, like, so I publish on Medium some of my short stories just because it's fun. You know, I want people to read them. I want them to go somewhere. definitely enter contests. Definitely try to get it published, and stick to the word count and see what happens. So I'm just a fan of sharing. So don't be, that's a don't. Do share. Share, everyone.
I see what you did there.
That's all. Okay.
Oh, fine. All right. And my last do is resolve the conflict in a unique and satisfying way. And this is going directly against what Candy said earlier, where you can have an ambiguous floppy ending.
Okay. Tell me about Stephen King's short stories. They're the best. That he writes the short stories, those are my favorite to read because he doesn't get to the ending. When you read the big novels that meander and get to an ending and all of a sudden he's a big spider, I mean, what the deal? That is like, I don't want to get to that unsatisfying ending. So for me, like Stephen King stuff, short stories, that is satisfying because I don't have to meet the monster. So
interesting.
Anyway, you say that it needs to have
some kind of resolution.
Sure.
Or when the reader gets to the end, they're going to be like, I don't understand why I read this. I don't know how my character grew. I don't know what problem he solved. It's a vignette. Like if it doesn't feel like anything was solved, then I feel that leads to frustration.
Sure.
So I feel most successful short stories do have some form of ending that does end something, even though it might leave you thinking. There's closure.
Okay. I'm trying to think. I'm thinking of those stories that I wrote and how they ended. It's like the short stories. And I'm thinking the Burgle doesn't leave you with a very glowing, happy ending.
They don't have to be happy. They just have to close.
It's just like oh my gosh, this is frightening. When the Burgle is eating your aspirations. He loves, they're tasty. That's frightening. I think maybe genre fiction, when it comes to short stories, might have where you might need to drop someone off a cliff.
Yeah, I didn't say a happy ending. I just said there needs to be something that feels like, okay, we've
hit the end of the road.
An ending.
This is it. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Would you like to say any sort of ending thought?
Do I have an ending thought?
Technically, no.
Well, you go first then. I'll think.
I just like putting you on the spot now.
Okay, fine. I'm going first. Okay, you put me on the spot. I'm going first.
Peer pressure is a powerful thing.
I'm going to just read your statement.
Dang it! It's a good statement.
No, when it comes to short stories, I do love them. I like reading short stories because they don't require a lot of time. And I do like writing them because they are creative nuggets, just like little inspirational boop nuggets. And so they're fun to just write because you don't have to. There's no stakes. You don't have to have that clean ending. You need a stopping point, but you don't need the brain work that a novel takes or a series takes. There's a lot of brain work. Short stories don't need that. And that's what I love about short stories, is just fulfilling my brain need to be creative and not having to work it so hard.
All right. I like it. That was good.
Thank you. Off the cuff.
Not bad for pulling it out of nowhere.
Totally.
For me, I think in some ways short stories are more difficult than novels because the requirement of trying to be more concise in your language and very precise in the use of every word in every sentence. They all need to carry meaning, and that can be daunting. But a novel is daunting in a different way. The length, the complexity, the number of characters, the number of settings, the number of storylines. So I think short stories are wonderful tools to help hone your craft because they can teach you a ton about literally every aspect of writing, and you have it in this really condensed form. And since they're so much shorter, they're less daunting in that way because you can get to the end. And then once you get to the end, that's when the learning happens, because then you can feel like you can get feedback and you can get people helping you with your craft and telling you places you might have challenges or places you're really strong and helping you improve in those ways. Because a lot of times we're like, I can't show my novel to anyone because it's not done yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to be waiting a really long time to get that really valuable feedback. So with short stories, that opportunity to learn and grow can come much faster. Mm-hmm. So that's why I really like them as well.
And I'll also add that publishing short stories is like an essential publishing credit. One of the things that our agents are looking for is something that where you've established, some kind of publishing history. And just having short stories is a great way to get into that business.
Absolutely. I would ask you what we're talking about next week, but we don't know.
It's a surprise, everyone.
It's going to be a surprise.
Yeah, we're heading into June and we don't know. You're in the dark with us, so we have no idea, but it's going to be fun.
All right. A huge thanks for listening. If you liked anything you heard today or in the past, remember we do have a Patreon. We also have a Buy Us a Coffee. If something we said reminded you of a friend who's writing a project and it's the perfect advice for them,
yes,
send this to them.
Yeah.
We will give you digital cookies.
Yes, we will.
I don't know what they look like yet, but let us know and we will give you a pat on the head and a gold star.
On your computer, getting all your data.
Not that kind of cookie.
It will be that kind of cookie.
It'll be a delicious, delicious internet cookie. This has been a terrific time talking to you. Thanks for joining me today.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Squirrel Podcast for the Distracted Writer with Candace J. Thomas and Jody L. Milner. Please like and subscribe to our podcast for updates and new episodes, and find more information at our website, squirrelpodcast.com. Stay distracted, everyone. Be generous with my dues.
Baby shark, do 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 do.
So, okay.